Brandt DXT grain carts have efficient unload speeds, large carrying capacities, unmatched durability, and reliable components that make sure your cart is working when you are. Lead the field with DXT grain carts from Brandt. Visit your local Brandt dealer for more information.
Bernard Tobin at the Agspray Expo in Jasper, Ontario. Today I am talking with Dr. Tom Wolf from Agrimetrix. We know him as the nozzle guy. Tom, how's it going?
It's going good. Thanks, Vern.
Awesome. Hey, great to have you back in Ontario. You are talking today about optical spraying. It's something that we're seeing more and more of. A lot of different systems out there. You started with the group here today, just running through the systems. Run them down for us.
Okay, so let's start with green on brown. The first one on the market for green and brown was something called Trimble WeedSeeker. It's been around for a long time, but it's kind of been displaced by other systems. But it would be basically a chem fallow or pre-seed burn-off system. It uses NDVI to see green things against a non-green background. The second system that more or less displaced the Trimble is WeedIt. It's a Dutch technology, and they've sold about 30 units in Western Canada, and they detect chlorophyll, so they can see things the size of a dime. If they're actively growing and make chlorophyll, it'll detect them and spray them. It does it on 10-inch spacing and is a very nicely high-resolution spot sprayer. John Deere has something called See and Spray Select that is also green on brown. It uses an RGB camera on 15 or 20-inch spacing. Quite similar, except it doesn't detect chlorophyll, so it kind of, if it's green paper or something, it would call that a weed. Also thresholding, not as sensitive as the weed system, so slightly larger weeds required to trigger it. John Deere offers a few different flavors. Let's go into the green on green system. So they have the John Deere See and Spray Ultimate, which is an AI-driven green on green system, and of course the See and Spray Premium, which is a retrofit, which they've been selling for very little money actually. So those are also capable of green on brown should you choose to do that. Outside of that family, we've got Agrifac. They've been offering something called AiCPlus. In the last few years, that has been a bilberry-based system, a French-based system that was recently acquired by Trimble. Lately, they have moved on to a new one called Robotics, which is an in-house green-on-green system. So we're just starting to see that in Western Canada. Further down the line, we've got two more systems. One of them is called Greeneye Technologies. That's an Israeli company. They're primarily focused on the row crop space in the United States, but they are available in Canada. That's a retrofit, and it's a 2-tank system, so very innovative there. And lastly, we have a system called Carbon Bee. That's a French system. It is also green on green. It is quite prominent in the Southern Hemisphere, South Africa, South America, and just moving into Australia. We hope to see them in Canada in 2026. That's about 6 or so. And, some are already, it's already a bit of a moving target. Some have already kind of diminished in the space. Some are yet to appear. For example, one smart spray, the Zarvio BSF, a collaboration with Bosch, that is yet to come, I guess.
Yeah. Tom, let's talk about where they fit. The story in Western Canada is much different than in the East. Let's start in the West, where you're based.
Yeah, in the West, I mean, they've taken off relatively quickly, even though we only really got serious about spot sprays green on brown for pre-seed burn-off and maybe pre-harvest, maybe desiccation or weed control, maybe some post-harvest. We're seeing about a total of 200 or so units operating in Western Canada across the various makes and models. They have great utility for a burn-off, relatively sparse weed population. They'll save you 75% of your product that you apply on a burn-off. They also, most systems have the capability of broadcasting a lower rate, so for those concerned with the tiny weeds in the early spring, you can get those with a broadcast at a slightly lower dose that will still kill those weeds. In that case, the savings are somewhere in the neighborhood of 40 or 50%. Moving into the green on green system, we have only John Deere premiums really installed in Manitoba in row crops, and we have some Agrifac AiCPluses installed in Manitoba and Saskatchewan. So those are really pioneering the green on green space, and we're hearing some results already for those. So people are relatively happy at this time. And then there's more to come as other markets develop and other companies choose to enter the space.
Tom, what about, I guess, where it's a good fit here in Ontario? Is it a case where, it's a good follow on a solid burn down or a pre-seed where you can go in there and really use that spot and spray to do a nice job and finish up a crop?
Yeah, I mean, the obvious one is obviously the pre-seed or the post-harvest or a fallow situation. That's the easy green on brown. But I think we have something really interesting happening in the corn and soybean sector, and that is the use of residuals. They've come back in a big way to fight resistance and to provide season-long weed control. A spot spray can really enhance that system. For example, let's say you're putting a residual down around seeding time, before or after, shortly thereafter, but there's really nothing post-emergent. You'd broadcast that with your conventional pass. The escapes that come out, or perhaps slightly resistant situations, you can spot spray those. You don't have to broadcast those anymore because they won't be that dense. Huge savings there. And furthermore, especially if you have things like water hemp and other resistant weeds, you can now mix a more effective tank mix cost effectively. You can put 4 or 5 active ingredients in a tank, make sure you get that water hemp. It might be 20 or 30 bucks an acre, but if you save 75% of that, it's actually not that expensive on a per acre basis. It really facilitates what I would call good strategy for dealing with resistant weeds, and that is multiple effective modes of action.
Let's talk about what you've been working on, especially from a seed and spray perspective, and that is nozzles. It is a challenge to get that coverage. You've talked about overlap, and especially when you've got boom sway. What's the big challenge here?
Yeah, it's a whole new world because we're doing 2 things with the same sprayer. One is we're broadcasting. So when, for example, there's a large patch of weeds, we might have to turn on many nozzles, and we want overlap. We want good consistency of that pattern across the width of that patch. In other cases, we might have only a single weed. So all we would do is turn on a single nozzle. Now, the rate coming out of the overlapping sprays and the single nozzle banded sprays have to be about the same because that's what you've tank mixed, okay? And so that's the challenge. As you know, a single nozzle spray, the footprint of that band depends on its angle. So in the first place, we've got some nozzles to show you. We've got a 120 degree nozzle. This is called the LDM. Very good broadcasting nozzle. Has a relatively wide pattern, a lot of overlap in that pattern. Very suitable for a multiple nozzle activation or overlapping nozzle activation. Not so suitable and not recommended for a single nozzle band spray. Pattern's too wide. So moving on, we're going a little bit narrower this time. So this would be an 80 degree fan. So this fan now at a regular working height extends roughly twice the width of the nozzle spacing. So its footprint is actually 40 inches wide, whereas the nozzle spacing is 20. That means in a single nozzle activation, this nozzle would approximately, it's a bit of a bell-shaped curve, but it would approximately halve the dose on a single nozzle activation because of the width of the footprint. So not a suitable spot spray nozzle either. Now we're getting into something over here. Here we have the 60 degree fan angle nozzle. Now this is a nozzle that has a nice compromise. So its width is just slightly wider than the nozzle spacing, which means in single nozzle mode, it provides some overlap, like it provides a footprint that's relatively narrow, but in multiple nozzle activation, it provides the required overlap. So we have to meet that ground where the footprint is slightly wider than the nozzle spacing. And of course, that doesn't allow for a lot of boom sway. Because as you know, a single nozzle fan inverted V, if you lower the boom, that V gets, the footprint gets narrower, and if you raise the boom, it gets wider. So the dose actually changes with boom height, which is something we haven't seen in a broadcast system. In some other places where they've deployed more spot sprays, are going down to the 40 degree fan angle. So now here we're in the sweet spot. So this footprint is about as wide as the nozzle spacing, depending on the boom height, of course, but we are very close to kind of the ideal compromise. The key thing here is that our booms have to be level. In order for this whole math to work out, we can't afford up and down movements of the boom. If that happens, then we might lose the overlap, or we might lose, the right dosing. So we have to make a decision. We have 2 possible rates here. Which one do we choose? In Australia, they've chosen to go with labeling or mixing for the single nozzle activation. So they get the right dose on, even if it has a slightly wider footprint. And then when they go to multiple nozzle activation and have a little broadcast region, they will actually apply a higher rate. And that's legal in Australia because they have spot spray labels for special herbicide rates.
So Tom, what does the future look like here? I mean, you mentioned in your presentation today, you've got about 150 see and spray units in Saskatchewan. You got about 30 WeedIts. What does this look like in the years ahead from an uptake of this technology, and how many will we see rolling out in the field?
Well, as Yogi Berra said, it's difficult to make predictions, especially about the future. But I am pretty excited about spot spray technology. You know, farmers' needs are for there to be no misses, okay? So the companies that provide this technology have to be diligent in their research and make sure they bring a product to market that gets 97% of the weeds that are present. We can't afford to have to respray, so it has to be pretty bulletproof. That's the factor driving adoption. If there's talk on Coffee Row that you have to respray a field because you tried to spot spray it, that is not going to be a good selling endorsement for this technology. So we're asking the companies to be cautious about implementation. We are still in the very early stages. Of course, there's lots of talk about the capabilities of AI and the fast rate of growth with capabilities. I hope that translates into the ag sector as well. I hope we see the day when we can spray these spot sprays in our narrow row spacing cereal and oilseed crops and pulse crops across the country.
Great stuff, Tom. Always appreciate you making some time for Real Agriculture.
Thank you, Bern.